Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of The Bible Yogi. I am your host, Douglas Roberts, and today we are doing our interview with Edward Elkins, author of the book, The Archko Volume Revealed, Part 2. And let me welcome to the show Mr. Edward
Hello.
Elkins. There he is. How are you doing, Mr. Elkins?
Hey, hello. Great.
I'm glad
So
to
how you
have you.
doing?
I'm doing good. So on this episode, I felt the best course moving forward is to go over the Cumberland Church hearing in detail, because upon that, Goodspeed rested almost his entire case.
Yep.
And that's the little research I did with ChatGPT and other sources, they pointed to that as proving the whole Archko volume was fraudulent, which I disagreed with, and that's how I found you. So,
Uh-huh.
to give a little bit of backstory, the Archko volume was published, in 1887, is that correct?
Yep.
And then shortly thereafterwards, Quarles started his argument with Reverend Mahan in the Boonville Topic newspaper.
Well, Mahan did his research overseas in 1883. Then in 1884, he published. It was only 2,000 copies that he published. It was called Archaeological Writings of the Sanhedrin and Talmuds, and there was only 2,000, as I said, 2,000 copies of that printed. And that was in 1884. Then in 1885 was this church hearing where everything was going back and forth in the newspapers and causing conflict. So then after this church hearing in 1885, Mahan decided to rework his book. In other words, give it more background material and stuff. And then he added affidavits and things like that from mayor, prosecuting attorney, Civil War general, and to help back up the whole thing. And that he called the Archko volume in 1887, which is what my book is based on, is the 1887.
1887.
Even though I do have one of the original 2000, I have one of those, and so I can compare both of them, and the manuscripts are exactly the same. He just changed some of the background material of his descriptions.
Did he add more books and letters to the second printing, or was it the same?
Yes. Well, he didn't add any more manuscripts.
Okay, just more
He
affidavits and stuff.
subtracted one. He subtracted one that was kind of disputed by a lot of people. He said he didn't know how it originated or anything himself, so he just pulled that one manuscript out.
That was Eli and the Magi or something like that? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So this guy, Reverend Quarles, has an issue with Mahan. Apparently his popularity was getting under his skin or something, and he had a personal vendetta against the man, and they started hashing it out in the Boonville newspapers.
Yep. And so that's where my wife and I, when I found out about that situation, that's when we went to Missouri, got into the newspaper archives, and found in the Boonville Topic and the Boonville Advertiser the descriptions and things about, and the articles about the church hearing that they had.
Well, also you got the editorials, or not the letters to the editor that Mahan and Quarles had when they were arguing back and forth in your book. I thought that was pretty fascinating. Before they went to the Cumberland Church hearing, right?
Yep. Yep. There was a lot of excerpts that I put in the book from the newspapers, not just the church hearing, but also their back and forth through the newspapers. From 1 week, it was those newspapers back then were not dailies; they were weeklies.
Okay.
And so, you'd have something 1 week, and then the next week something, and it may go for a month, and then you'd have something or a couple weeks, and where you'd have a response.
Okay, so let me see if I can get this right. How Mahan died in like 1905, 1906.
6,
So, in these Cumberland Church things, that was about 1886 or so.
1885.
1885. So,
Yeah,
how
the
old
church
was
here.
Mahan during the church hearing?
About 61 years old.
Yeah, so he was. That's up there. That's
Yeah.
old enough for it to be a very concerning thing. So let's go
And
through the church hearing then. There were three charges against him, and they were all brought to him by Quarles. And it always seems to me like he was just fishing for anything to discredit the man, and almost none of it, in fact, none of it, had anything to do with the book itself and the authenticity of the writings in the book. He just was attacking Reverend Mahan.
yeah, he was basically attacking the messenger. He wasn't really so much attacking the manuscripts themselves.
Yeah,
He was using anonymous sources. Sometimes he'd say, well, I was told by this guy, or this person said this and whatever and stuff, but without giving who it was exactly.
really.
And yeah, and so he was just grasping at straws, anything to attack Mahan's book with, because he was trying to destroy uh, Mahan's reputation and thereby also destroy the book itself.
Yeah, it's crazy. So he had this vendetta going on. Now, what were the three charges that he ended up bringing before the Presbyterian Council?
The first one had to do with the fact that Mahan, the charge was that Mahan had never been overseas, had never been to the Rome, Constantinople, the libraries over there. And so Mahan had letters from people in Europe to show in at the church trial thing. Now, what it was to add some background to it, was Quarles was Presbyterian, and so was Mahan. They were both Presbyterians, but they was of different synods or different groups, factions within the Presbyterian Church. And so it got to the point with what was going on in the paper that was looking bad on the Presbyterians as a whole. And so they decided at one of their meetings, when they got a bunch of preachers together, that they would have a hearing on this and decide once and for all who was right on what was going on. And so there was 17 ministers that were jurors, and then you had Mahan had one of the ministers to help him as far as like an attorney, and then there was two people on the defense team or on the prosecution team trying to go after Mahan. So you had several ministers there. And so the first charge, as I said, was that he hadn't been overseas, and ended up they found him not guilty of lying about going overseas. The letters that he had from people in Europe, their expert said that they were authentic. And so that backed that up, and there was just several other things that he brought into it. And the whole church hearing lasted like the whole day, from the morning into the evening.
Wow. So that was like an independent auditing firm or something like that from New Orleans, if I recall, that looked at the the postage
Oh,
marks.
that would be a later letter that came from one of the captains of the ship. That letter is not in the Archko volume. It's found in Caesar's Court by G.A. Reynolds.
So that wasn't submitted at the Cumberland Church hearing then, or you don't know?
No.
Okay. So
No,
what was the? So that was pretty much the huge thing. That was the only thing that Quarles had that was directly associated with the Archko volume, was that. And that charge was, they said it was sustained, or no, not sustained, right? That was the correct.
Correct.
So the sustained, not sustained is like opposite to how we understand it today with regards to objections in a court. If it was sustained, then that means the charge was sustained, and not sustained mean no, the charge was, we didn't find any evidence to uphold the charge, so it was not
Yes.
sustained. The next two, though, which is where well, like I've said, it sounds like he was just digging at, grasping at straws to try to discredit Mahan, and that was what was the second charge?
Okay, the second charge, going back to the first charge, though, is what you were saying was not sustained. That was in the topic, but in the Boonville Advertiser, it flat out said not guilty.
Okay.
But then going with the second charge, what it was Quarles had digging deep for dirt on Mahan. He'd found where Mahan had wrote another book. He'd wrote a couple, three other books or whatever, but but this one in particular was on baptism.
The history of baptism.
Yep. And so Mahan knew this preacher who kind of wrote some things about baptism for his congregation, and he'd never published the letters, and so he died. And so Mahan's thinking, okay, these were never published, they're not copyrighted, and so he used some of the information from that and put it three paragraphs into his book. And so Quarles seen where he had done that, and so then tried to get him for plagiarism. But Mahan's thing was that they were not copyrighted. He had never went public with them or anything like that. So he thought it was okay for him to put it in a book as part of his instructional thing about baptism.
Now they did think that was a legitimate charge. So, but I mean, what do you think? It sounds pretty trivial to me.
Yeah, it's very trivial. It's very minor. And back then, see, you had state copyright and national copyright. You had two different things going on. It wasn't until long after that they did away with state copyrights and just had a national copyright. But yeah, it's just like grasping for straws or trying to find any kind of dirt that he can dump on him to try to discredit him. And Mahan admitted to it. He said that he had, pulled some stuff from his thing and put it in there.
He probably never foresaw that one day his ministry was going to come under that kind of a scrutiny and to begin with, right? He's just like, I'm just trying to help my flock here, and help the church. I don't think that anyone's going to come and examine every single word I ever write. All right, so What was the third charge?
Well, just another thing going on with the second one, I've listened to a couple interviews, especially this one interview with a big name author of today who has several books, and he's very, very well known. And anyways, he was asked about plagiarism. He says, I plagiarize all the time. He says, I have people send me articles about real things and stuff. And he says, and so when I can't think of something, I'll start picking through these things that people send me, and then I add that to the story. Now, those are novels, okay, but still, so like in Mahan's case, he didn't think he was really doing anything wrong. And then the third charge was
that Lew Wallace and Ben-Hur?
Yes. And there's a couple places where Mahan had written, which goes back to Eli and the Magi, which was in his original book that he wrote, that there was only 2,000 copies, and then he took that out because it was so disputed. But even in there, he says, who wrote it? I'm not sure. He says, I don't know anything about this. They just happened to find it in the library. And so they found this in the library, and there's a couple places where it's kind of worded the ideas and the wording is very similar to the book that
Lou Wallace.
Ben-Hur.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you read through Ben-Hur, I took and read Ben-Hur, and you could find it's like 3 different people writing it. And like there's one part, like the where they do the horse thing in the circus, that this one military guy took some time out from the military to help him write that section of the book. And so then okay, cut a minute. So General Douglas had wrote the book Ben-Hur, and there was some a little section of it that was very similar to what Mahan wrote in Eli and the Magi. And so they tried to say that he plagiarized from that book. But that would be like somebody writing a history or writing a story about dinosaurs and quoting Jurassic Park and writing sections from Jurassic Park. I mean, nobody would try that because everybody would right away recognize it. Same with Ben-Hur. It was an international book. And so why would Mahan pull stuff out of there when he would, anybody, would right away recognize it? And Mahan wasn't aware of that. He's a backcountry preacher anyhow. And so he, what I think was he found whatever it was, as he said, in that library. And somehow prior to that, Douglas had gotten a hold of it. And I don't know whether somebody saw it there and sent it to the Library of Congress, because General Douglas said he had this close friend of his that was running the Library of Congress. And so he said in his own autobiography, he found 2 books in there that he wanted to use for the writing of Ben-Hur. And I think maybe somebody saw it and sent it back here and published it. And that's where General Douglas had it. Mahan found it over in Turkey. But the interesting thing about it, another interesting thing, was that General Douglas was not the governor of Mexico because it wasn't a state yet, but he was running the territory of New Mexico. And then he wanted a different job, and he was offered several different ones by the president, but he said, no, I want to go to Turkey. So why did he want to go to Turkey? To Constantinople? I don't know. Probably because he already knew that's where that document was, in my mind. And so then you find out that the book that General Douglas wrote before Ben-Hur was plagiarized. And then you find plagiarized from Dr. Somebody. And there they.
Okay, let me pause a second. Okay, so in Goodspeed's book, The Strange New Gospels, much of his attempt to discredit the Archko volume was predicated on the results of the Cumberland Church hearing. But as you've shown in your book, Mahan was not found guilty of anything related to the Archko volume, and thus much of Goodspeed's argument against Mahan is completely discredited.
That is correct. Goodspeed was mostly using what he found from Quarles and the nonsense that he wrote, but he was cherry picking stuff that was negative. The exact cherry picking would be when he said that no one in Boonville, where Mahan lived, believed that he'd ever been out of the United States, and that he was found not guilty of that, of lying about that. He was found that he proved in court that he had been overseas, and Quarles, in the other 2 charges that he was actually found guilty pleasurizing with the baptism and a few quotes from someone else, and then a few quotes from Ben-Hur and General Douglas out of that, are just two minor things that have nothing to do with the manuscripts whatsoever, and what went on overseas, and what went on as far as Pilate and the other records that are in there. And so Goodspeed also, when he said that no one there, going back to what I said, that no one there believed that, there's the affidavit from Pendleton, who at the time was the prosecuting attorney and then later mayor. He was alive in 1931, 31, whenever it was, that Goodspeed wrote his diatribe against Mahan in the book, the Archko Volume, because Pendleton died in 1942. And it's obvious that Goodspeed had read the Archko Volume because he quotes from it. And so he had to have seen the affidavits. And so why did he not get a hold of Pendleton to find out the truth? Or did he get a hold of Pendleton and find out the truth and decide, okay, I'm not going to write about it because it doesn't fit my agenda? Because it seems like the whole thing that Goodspeed was doing was trying to railroad Mahan.
Absolutely.
And as we said before, Goodspeed, when you read his books, he doesn't believe anything in the Bible is true. He thinks it's just all made up completely. And so that would fit his attitude with the Archko Volume, because if he believes the Bible was just made up stuff and the Archko Volume backs up the Bible and the Bible backs up the Archko Volume, then the Archko Volume has to be fabricated, because he believed the Bible was fabricated. So
right, exactly. And that was, to me, that was great research on your part to unearth that, and you had to actually read Goodspeed's books. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And so I took quotes out of there to show exactly what he thought about certain things, Goodspeed did. And then also I took and pulled things out of the manuscripts that were in there and backed them up with history and historical references, and to prove those things correct. And also just to show what actually went on.
Yeah,
there's so much history.
There was, and one of the things that you documented very copiously was the whole thing about I think it was Muhammad that created the library in Constantinople, and you discussed how he rescued all the libraries that the Christians and the Jews had made.
Oh yeah, going back to that, the Islamic guy. I go into just a second here. When this Islamic guy conquered Constantinople, which was of Christian origin, he preserved all documents that he could find in there, because he wanted to make Constantinople a learning center. And he wanted to look good to people, to scholars around the world, that have them want to come to his kingdom. So what a lot of people try to say is, well, when he conquered Constantinople, he would have destroyed everything that was Christian, anything that wasn't Islamic. And that
was Mehmet,
is what normal
Mehmet too. That's who that was.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. And so people say, well, he would have automatically destroyed that. And yeah, that's the way conquerors are. Anytime a conqueror takes over somebody, they try to destroy their writings and their history and everything behind of it. And he didn't do that. And so I read two other books and found where he, which were written about Mehmet, and backs up the fact that he tried to preserve everything that he could preserve, because he wanted, as I said before, to be an intellectual society. and have people from the world come there, and he wanted to boost his own ego. So
There you go.
that's why they're still there. And also, as I think I said before, that's why Mahan wanted to go over there, was because this guy Branios in 1873 found some Christian manuscripts that no one had seen before. They'd read about them in first, second, third, fourth century type historians had mentioned them, but nobody had actually seen them. Well, he actually found them, and that became world renowned. And so when Mahan found out about that, that's when he sent Mackintosh of the Antiquarian Society to go there to check it out. And he found some manuscripts and said, hey, you're going to be really interested in this. And so then Mahan decided, okay, I got to get the money together to get overseas, to get over there to see these manuscripts. And since he had a help of someone else, now Mackintosh, he was a Christian, but Wyman, he was not. But anyways, he was just into history. And so that's why he was helping with the whole thing.
All right.
And so help translate everything.
I'm gonna have to have to end it here because my Zoom meeting is running out. But I think we've done a great job promoting your book and making sure that anyone who listens to this video will understand the validity of the Archko volume, and that it totally supports the Bible and our view of Jesus as a historical figure and everything that surrounded his life. So, Mr. Elkins, I really appreciate you coming on my little channel. And God
Thank you
bless
very much.
And I'm going to just play my little outro, all righty?
All right.
And let's see if I can find it. There we go. And boom.